My name's Nelson Weirick. Here to give a little bit of a historical account of my time in service. And I was born and raised here in Worcester. Except for my time away in the military, I've lived here all my life. Married, got 2 kids and 6 grandkids. Made a few notes so I wouldn't stumble over what I wanted to say. I originally joined the Navy in January of 1974. I went to basic training in Orlando, Florida. I had a choice of Orlando, San Diego, or Great Lakes, and I was going in January. My dad said when he went in January, the first thing they issued him was a snow shovel, and didn't want a snow shovel. And part of my schooling was going to be in San Diego, so I opted to go to Orlando, which turned out good because my family came down and for graduation, and Disney World was open then. And so they all got to go to Disney World. I had 2 phases of school training. The first phase was in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We learned a lot of our damage control type work. My rate as a hull technician involved damage control, firefighting, and such. And the other phase of it in San Diego had to do with repairs. We were in charge of anything that broke. And that involved welding, metalwork, sheet metal work, woodworking, anything like that. Anything that broke, we fixed it. The first command I had was in Charleston, South Carolina. It was a submarine tender, the USS Hunley. AS-31 was the hull number. The AS stands for an auxiliary type ship, and the S stands for submarine. We tended submarines that carried nuclear missiles, boomers we called them, and they would come alongside and get replenished with food or munitions or repairs, things like that. The interesting thing about boomers, they had 2 crews. One crew would take the boat for 3 months, and they could be out on station in the ocean somewhere. The other crew was at home at base, and they would use that downtime to go to schools or take vacation leave, that sort of stuff. Every 3 months, then the crews would change. One crew would go off, the other crew would come on. My job there was in radiological controls. We worked primarily with repairs to the nuclear reactors on the submarines. We set up the containments and stuff. We weren't the welders or the actual mechanics. We set up the containments to prevent the spread of contamination, radioactive material, things like that, because there were radioactive liquids and solids involved. We would set those up so that nobody got that stuff on them, eventually tear them down when the work was done. And the nuclear waste got waste packed into 55-gallon drums and shipped out west somewhere, or stored in a mine or a cave somewhere underground. We were told Nevada, but who knows? I got out in January of 78. I came back home to Worcester, started a family, got my job back. And I then, because of some friends and my cousin and my brother were in the Worcester unit of the Army National Guard. And they said, no, you should come play Army with us. We get blank ammo and get to shoot each other, and we go camping. Sounded like fun. So I joined the National Guard for about 3 years. Circumstances turned around to where I ended up looking to go back on active duty to get my retirement. And in around April of 85, I went back into the Navy. Had to go up to Great Lakes, get reissued uniform, get re-indoctrinated, new policies, procedures, things like that. And then got my orders from there. I went to a place called the Little Creek Amphibious Base, which is down in Virginia Beach. There's a shore intermediate maintenance activity there called SEMA. And we worked on the ships, did repairs. I was in a pipe shop. And anything that had to do with piping on these ships, the welders, we would cut out the whatever was bad, a valve or a bad piece of piping. The welders would come in and fit up new piping or valves and such, and then would get that all welded up. Interesting thing about that, they were starting to integrate females into some of the rates, and my job as a hull technician had not previously been open to females. We got several of the first ones at that command. There was 3 girls. Can't even remember their name, but most of the guys didn't want to work with the girls. It was that guy macho thing, I guess. I didn't mind if they worked with me because I'd teach them what to do. They wanted to learn. They didn't mind getting into bilges, cutting pipe, and getting dirty. And if that meant me staying clean, then all the better. But I was the only one that would allow them to work with me. So consequently, every job I got, even if it was a one-man job, it was 4 of us, 3 girls and myself. And I took a little ribbing from the wife because every time I had to stay and work to completion, it was, "Oh, I suppose the girls are with you tonight." Yeah, they are. But they were great, hard workers, and didn't have any problems with that. After my tour was done there, I ended up on the USS Shreveport, which is an LPD landing dock platform. And what we did, it was considered an amphibious type ship. And we could handle 600 Marines and all their equipment to put them ashore anywhere in the world. And they had enough equipment and supplies to last them 30 days till they could get resupplied. It was part of what they called a MARG, M-A-R-G, Marine Amphibious Readiness Group. There were 5 ships involved, and we spent 6 months in the Mediterranean doing military maneuvers and such with various countries around the Mediterranean. And our guys would make their beach assaults and such, and then come back and we'd load the ship and move on to the next place. Got to see some interesting places. We went around to Tangiers, Morocco, Haifa, Israel. We pulled into Sicily and Italy. Did Marseille and Toulon, France. And most of the times we pulled in, we were in for a week to 10 days. Plenty of time to liberty and see the town and buy souvenirs and stuff for the kids. When I left the Shreveport, I had orders to I was ready to re-enlist for another term, and I had an opportunity to request either specific orders or a specific school as a re-enlistment incentive. I chose to go to NDT School, non-destructive testing. I was going to become a welding inspector. And that was, what was that, about 4 months out in San Diego for school. And I got that request approved. And my first command after that was the USS Bainbridge, CGN 25. CGN stands for Cruiser Guided Missile Nuclear. She was nuclear powered, of course. Then we had to have nuclear welders, which meant you had to have a quality assurance department and inspectors to inspect the work that they did to make sure that it was done to various mil-spec standards and manuals and such. During the Bainbridge, we did one of our evolutions was called Operation Steelbox. Steelbox is not classified. They were taking a bunch of nerve and chemical agent warfare materials, artillery shells, etc., out of Europe to be disposed. That was all trucked into Wilhelmshaven, Germany. We pulled into port We were sent there to escort 2 cargo ships full of this. They would load up with all these munitions, and we were there to escort them, so nobody tried to hijack them or anything like that. They wouldn't even let us come down through the English Channel because it was too narrow and restrictive and a good choke point for an attempt to hijack. So we had to go up and over the United Kingdom, England, and all, and down the Atlantic all the way around South America because they wouldn't even let us go through the Panama Canal. And then we come up through the Pacific to the West Coast. We turned over to a West Coast ship just off of Panama. They took the stuff on out to Johnson Atoll, where they had a big incinerator unit to destroy this stuff. We spent a couple days in Panama City, and then we came through the Panama Canal, and then came back home to the Norfolk area. Later, we were sent to the Persian Gulf for Desert Storm. So I had the opportunity to go through the Suez Canal. And we spent 6 months in the Red Sea, or not the Red Sea, but the Persian Gulf, went through the Red Sea. We were running radar for the no-fly zone off the coast of Iraq. We'd do that for 2 weeks, and then we'd go down to either Dubai or Jebel Ali, which was a commercial shipping port in just up from Dubai, both in the United Arab Emirates. We'd pull in for 2 weeks, reload food, rest up, get a chance to be tourists, and then we'd go back up and run no-fly radar for 6 months, or for 2 weeks during that 6 months. We came out of there, and we had an opportunity for a port call down in Mombasa, Kenya. Crossed the equator, and of course there's always in the Navy traditions, a shellback initiation when you cross the equator, because you're no longer just a polywog, as the terminology goes. You become a shellback by crossing the equator. And there's an initiation which they decided that later years that it was too much hazing, and they really put a stop to that kind of stuff. But I got to go through it myself, and then also as a shellback initiating other polywogs. So it's a unique experience. We come out of the Persian Gulf, and we come back through the Med on our way home after 6 months. And the Navy, in its infinite wisdom, decided that we should detour and come out of the Mediterranean and make a hard right and head up to the Arctic Circle. There was a NATO exercise, and they decided, since we were already over there, it was cheaper to send us up in our carrier battle group, as opposed to sending the one that was participating in the exercise off the east coast of the U.S., rather than sending them across the ocean and bringing them back. So we got delayed for 2 weeks to go do that. As it turned out, the remnants of a hurricane, and everybody ran for port except the carrier. She was too big and nuclear powered, and nobody would let her in port. And since we were nuclear powered, we had to escort the carrier. Carriers don't go anywhere by themselves. So we got beat up pretty good in a storm. A couple $1 million in damage, antennas lost, and things got broke from the waves. There were reports of 30-foot waves, which everybody was confined to stay inside the ship. So I didn't get to see the waves, but sure felt them in that. While we were up in the Arctic Circle, there's another initiation. It's called a Blue Nose. If you cross the Arctic Circle, there's an initiation, but it was too cold. We didn't officially do the initiation, but we got awarded the certificates because we did cross the Arctic Circle and was up in that area. After my tour on the Bainbridge, I ended up back on shore duty at a unit called ACU-4, Assault Craft Unit 4. At the time, it was the Navy's newest landing type craft. It's not the old boats you would see in the World War II movies that drop the bow ramp. They did have a bow ramp, but they also had a stern ramp, and they were bigger. They operated on big fans. They had 4 jet engine fans. 2 of them operated a big fan that filled this airbag that was all around the landing craft. It was a black, heavy, reinforced rubber type material, almost like a tire. It had small holes in the bottom of the bag, and the fan would fill up the bag with air. And if you ever blow up a balloon and let go of it, you got a large volume of air coming out of a small hole, and the balloon goes. Same type of thing. The big bag would fill up with air, and as it came out of the small holes in the bottom, it caused lift. And they were actually off the ground. They said they were flying. They had 2 other jet engines that operated big propellers on the back, which gave you your propulsion through the water then. And they had rudders then for steering, kind of like an airplane. And the Navy is still using those today. I was in a quality control department at that time, and we did the welding inspections. These craft were all aluminum, and consequently, if they set down on the beach and happened to set on a rock or a tree stump or something, something would break. The hull would crack or something, and they would take on a little bit of water, but they would know it. So we had to find these cracks, and then they would go in and do a weld repair on them. Consequently, or interestingly enough, the majority or the most common place was actually in a fuel tank. And to find the leak, and the fuel tank could only be 6-8 foot by 8 or 10 feet, and maybe 4 or 5 feet high. We would actually put on Scott air packs like a fire department would use so we could breathe. And we'd go inside the tank. They would seal us in and suck all the air out. And we would spray soap bubbles around suspected areas. And if that's where the crack was, it would suck air through and then cause a bubble. Then we could mark it so that the welders knew where to weld repair it. Of course, there was always a lot of joking about "don't piss me off" or "I'm going to lock you in there and we won't let you out" type of thing. But we always got out. One of the interesting things that happened while I was there, I got a phone call back in my office one day, and the quarterdeck guys said, "There's some lieutenant commander," which is a rank, "up here, says he's here to see you." I says, "Well, who?" Well, they told me his name. I didn't know this guy. Well, I'll come up and get him. And they said, "Oh, we'll bring him back." So they brought him back to my office, which was a shop area. And we had, 5 or 6 other guys all working there. And so this guy comes in, he introduces himself. "Have a seat, get your cup of coffee," what have you. We started talking. Well, then he tells me that he's investigating, he's with NCIS, investigating crimes. And there's been reports of these landing craft smuggling drugs back from other countries. And I'm going, "Oh, crap." And he says, "And everybody we've interviewed, there's one thing keeps coming up in common, and that's your name." Well, of course, I'm shocked. I have no idea what this guy's talking about. And of course, I got the attention of everybody in the room. So he goes on a little bit and he goes, "Yeah, one of the instigators in this whole thing," he says, "maybe you know him. His name's Clifford Weirick." Well, that's my uncle out in San Diego. He's a retired Navy guy. He knew this buddy of his was coming to Norfolk for a corrosion conference, and they set up this prank to tell me that I was being accused of drug smuggling. Well, it turned out I wasn't, and this guy was all... And at the time, it was a pretty funny joke, and got a lot of attention in the shop because everybody thought I was going to jail. And such. My last command when I left there was on another subtender. This was the Emory S. Land AS-39 in Norfolk. And this submarine tended submarines, what they call fast attacks. These are the hunter-killer subs. They go out and they look for shipping or other submarines to take out, as opposed to sitting in a designated area and launching missiles if necessary. I was on assigned to the general workshop at the time, again, in charge of all repairs on our ship, but not on the submarines. I had an opportunity then for an early retirement. The Navy was downsizing in 98. And I put a request in to retire 2 years early. It was full benefits. And it got approved. So instead of retiring in 2001, I retired in March of 1999. Moved my family back here to Worcester. Kids were in their second year of high school down there. They've been pretty much raised their entire lives in Norfolk. Didn't want to move. Not going to move. We're not going to go. Okay, stay. I don't care. I'm leaving. And they did. They all moved. Didn't like it, but within 2 years of being back, both of my kids came to me separately at different times and thanked me for getting them out of Norfolk, which a little bit of a bad scene, bad part of town, that kind of thing. And my son especially knew that he was starting to hang with the wrong crowd, and I think he was the most relieved to get out of there and such like that. So we've been back here. Both my kids have grown, got married. They each got kids, and my daughter lives in Indianapolis with her husband Rob. He's an Army vet. And he works for FedEx, and my son lives out in New Pittsburgh. He works for Worcester Brush. I think he just hit 25 years and such. I'll finish up with my awards throughout my career. I have 4 Navy Achievement Medals, Meritorious Unit Commendation. We have a Battle Efficiency Award because the ship of our classification at the time was the most battle efficient and ready at the time. 4 good conducts, 2 national defenses, which you get during time of war. My first hitch in the 74 Vietnam was still going on. Although I never went to Vietnam, I'm considered a Vietnam era. Southwest Asia Medal for the Persian Gulf, 2 sea service for the 2 6-month deployments. We had a Coast Guard Special Ops Award for helping. There was a time when there was a bunch of people trying to get out of the Dominican Republic and Haiti, all kinds of homemade boats and rafts and stuff trying to get across to Florida. And we had to circle the island constantly and looking for people to pick them up, return them, just more of a safety thing. Had a Kuwait Liberation Medal because we were there at the time Kuwait was liberated. An Expert Rifle Award, and Army service for my time in the National Guard. All in all, I enjoyed my time. Consequently, I went back to get the retirement. That's all paying off for me now. Get that nice monthly retirement check. And the better part of it was the free medical. I haven't had to purchase any healthcare insurance since I've been out. Saved me a ton of money. Navy's taking care of all that for both myself and the wife, the kids while they were young. And I think I went back to do that and accomplish that and just living the dream now.